Academy. We should ask them about that. We should ask them, why the heck don't we go to Costa Rica anymore? But kind of funding and a few other things. But that's where we started this partnership with political science. And in the class you're in, actually, we jointly came up with that. We're kind of the practical, hands-on folks. How do you do sustainability? Your side of it is, how do we conceptualize it, get it going, and put it into policy, okay? Which is the hardest part by far. Okay, so we'll start again. So I think, here we go. Powerful. Okay, you can turn on a little more light, so if that helps. Chris, is that good what you got?
That should be good.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So birth of sustainability. We've got it's a new concept. I mean, to how many of you is it still like, what the heck is that? Okay. Good. Kobe, there's no excuse.
I knew you were going to say that to me.
Come on, I've been beating this into you for one class already.
I got it, I'm just teasing.
Yeah. So where did it come from? It's a new concept. That's what the book starts off by doing. So I'm going to show you a few slides. Hopefully you guys can see in the back there. Those are, give you the context, those are olive ridley turtles nesting. Okay? This is in Costa Rica. It's in probably one of the uniquest events. Only happens in, they say, 5 or 6 beaches in the world. And in this case, it's called Ribidas, the arrival. And this is in broad daylight. And normally, olive ridleys and most other turtles nest at night. Okay? So, unbelievably important natural resource. Okay? Because it's incredible, and who doesn't like turtles? And turtle conservation has led the world. By the way, turtle people and researchers were way ahead of many other groups in terms of setting up the standards and putting them in place. And then all of a sudden, we've got this extremely remote beach there with these olive ridleys. Well, if you know anything about the culture, so there's your natural side of sustainability. This is obviously a great resource for tourism, for all sorts of things, for the biodiversity itself. Just incredibly rich thing and just world-renowned, except that they've kept it pretty quiet because they didn't want too many people to know about it. Then you have to put in one part of the social side. These are Costa Rican coastal community, more on the native tribal side. They're a little bit lower down the economic scale. Costa Rica is really not what you would call a complete third world country. The average person in Costa Rica makes about $10,000 a year, which puts them way up. You know, you've got people like Hewlett Packard there. You've got Microsoft. You've got Intel with factories in San Jose, Costa Rica. A 50-year-old democracy. Sustainability is built into their very being there. They lead the world in sustainability. On the other side, socially, we have turtle eggs. And so we discovered all of this by chance on a surfing trip with my son. And we actually pulled up a couple of villages before. It's a very remote village. We were surfing down the coast. It's got also renowned for its surf. And we actually had to cross some rivers. We had a 4-wheel drive vehicle to get to this place. It's a little better now because it's got a road coming from the other side. But basically, when the rains come, which we were at the start of the rainy season, about this time of the year, a little later, it becomes impossible to get to these places. So, but they have a tradition there of where these eggs are a delicacy. And just like, unfortunately, a lot of the world, they also have these supposed aphrodisiacal kinds of components, right? So the tradition in Costa Rica for many, many years, until it was actually banned, there isn't, other than the story I'm going to tell you, there's not a lot of ways you can get these eggs legally. That was banned, but it's still available because the poaching is rife. The biggest poaching problem in Costa Rica by a mile is for these eggs, right? These little ping pong, they look like broken up ping pong balls is what the eggs look like, okay? So we have these things. This goes on for a week. So just kind of put that in your mind and just think about it. Okay, natural resources, social, economic, of course, right? Because if I could sell these eggs legally, that's going to make my little village a lot of money. Okay? And we're just going to kind of talk about this as we go along, form some images. Well, how about this image? Okay, so in there, I've got some other ones. I'll put them up online. But in there, what do you think's in those bags?
Turtle eggs.
Yeah, and where are those people taking it?
Market.
Yeah. If you saw that image just randomly, and I had a friend post this to me last week when I was in Watuko, and saying, what the heck's going on here? What is this? They're basically destroying this resource, right? And we all know that many turtle populations around the world are struggling, okay? And there, of course, is not me surfing, because I'm not nearly as good as that, but that's the reason people would come to this place, okay? So I'm going to kind of leave the story there for a moment till we get a little bit further into what is sustainability, because this is actually a very, very amazing story. It's the best example, the clearest, one of the most interesting examples of sustainable development that I've ever heard about. And like I said, my son and I stumbled on it by accident. We actually got to this beach, we were sitting on the beach, watching these massive waves out there, way too big for myself, and one of the locals came up and sat next to a surfer, and he showed us where to go out and where to surf. And while I was sitting there, I noticed these things. I didn't even know what turtle eggs looked like. I noticed these casings that had been eaten up. And I actually, down the beach, noticed some turkey vultures actually getting into something. And so later, it turns out they were actually raiding the turtle nests. Okay, so yeah, so what basically are some of the principles of sustainability? Okay, we'll get to sustainability itself, but how is sustainability? Basically, what we're going to look around here is how is sustainability different from lots of other movements? Well, one of the key things about sustainability and leadership is it's decentralized. Okay? The leadership, we don't have an iconic leader like an Al Gore, a big name. The people working in sustainability in all facets of it, whether it's social, economic, or environmental, they're all grassroots. And I might be a river sustainable expert on how to restore riparian habitat in the river. Okay? One of the projects we have here that you'll see on one of the field trips is one of those. And I will be communicating maybe with someone in South Africa that is way out in the boondocks doing the same thing. It's very decentralized, it's very humble, it's very much about the community. This is just how it's come up, because it came up from the bottom. It didn't come from the top down. From the top down, we've got different kind of models that are more economically based, more policy based than this.
Mr. Slade?
Yes.
Will all this be online?
Yes, it was. Maximizes appropriate technology. Okay? Technology, so I'm going to throw you a lot of different stuff here. Just let it sink in, take notes. Appropriate technologies is this concept that technology is good, right? We'll find out that sustainability depended on the internet and free exchange of information between different classes and different socioeconomic groups. But it's appropriate technology, using the technology appropriately. So example being, am I going to go out and fish for whatever fish I want to catch? In Huatuco, Mexico, we were fishing just because it was part of a tour we went on with Dorado, Mai. Or am I going to use a big fishing trawler with a factory boat for that, sitting right off the coast where I can process them immediately? And am I going to use drag nets, or am I going to use fishing lines? Right? So it's the appropriate use of technology. And we're not saying that couldn't be used in some situations, but if the population's under stress, then maybe that isn't appropriate. Okay? We want to seek simple, time-tested solutions. Right? real quick one of those would be the three sisters. Dakota, I think, was talking about this yesterday. Indian cultures, all the way back to the Maya cultures, grew three species together. They grew their corn, their beans, and their squash together. It's called three sisters. You grow them next to each other together. In modern agriculture, when we get to sustainable, you'll see we are all about monoculture. We grow one thing over the whole of Kansas, corn, because it's easier, cheaper, more profitable to do that. Okay? But they did that because there's advantages. So do you guys know what would be some of the advantages of growing these three species together for your food?
The nutrition of each other.
Yeah,
The
Rebecca?
zucchini keeps the ground nice and moist.
Right? Keeps it kind of like ground cover. Yeah, exactly.
They shade each other.
They shade each other.
The beans fix the nitrogen back into the soil.
Yeah. Beans are a legume, very interesting. Fix one of the three key nutrients, which is nitrogen from the atmosphere. We have 78% nitrogen in the atmosphere. And remember, we're going to find out nature recycles and reuses everything. So that a legume fixes it, puts it in the ground, and now the corn and the zucchini or the squash can use it. The corn even acts as a way for the zucchini or whatever bean or whatever it is, the bean mostly, to go up. All kinds of interdependency and interconnections, just as they are in an ecosystem. An ecosystem is just a living group of interconnection where all these species and the environment and the topography are all interconnected, right? Man comes along and we tend to split that up. So they're very simple, time-tested solutions. I'm building my house out of straw bales. I'm building a straw bale house. We have a workshop, by the way, on June 30th, that Saturday, 74F, where you'll learn all about that stuff. So encourage you. It'll be here. I don't know, maybe we'll sneak off to our place later in the afternoon. I don't know. We'll have to figure out with this dang liability stuff. But anyway, straw bales have been used forever. Cob houses have been used forever. Okay? We mimic natural cycles, and we'll be talking about that. Carbon is recycled. This whole mess with CO2 is just saying that potentially the carbon dioxide cycle is out of balance. But we are always taking up food in the morning, carbohydrates, long chain carbons, breaking them up and taking the energy out of them and breathing out CO2. Taking in oxygen, breathing out CO2. So this carbon cycle is continually moving. We're just saying that man maybe has pushed it too far out of balance. That's what global warming, the whole carbon dioxide thing's about. We want to mimic that. That's a natural growing cycle to mimic this three sisters method, right? We want to encourage local community. Okay? This is actually the hardest part. That story in Costa Rica, I'll start bringing out a few pieces of why that's so sustainable. It started with a researcher who later on, it's a fascinating story because later on that researcher from the University of Costa Rica got sideways with this community, but she encouraged the community to build a structure, to build a council. They might have had a tribal council before, but they built a structure, and they basically came up with a plan. Okay? And basically their plan was to engage, to get the buy-in from as many of the people as possible. So one of the people, for example, that showed us when we were there, when we went to Costa Rica, we spent 2 or 3 days at this place and help out and do poaching patrols and all this kind of stuff. But one of the people that leads those tours is an ex-poacher. Okay? So let's give him a job. Let's get him involved. Other people, as you can see, are actually harvesting the eggs. Other people are marketing them, driving them to town. Other people are managing the council and managing the money to where economically, so socially, we built up a structure, and they got a special law passed for those kinds of cooperatives to where they can actually legally harvest the first 2 days of the about 7 days Arribidas. Because actually, if you look back at that thing, you can actually see it happening.
What's it called?
Arribidas. A-R-R-I-B-I-D-A-S. Arribidas. What does that mean, Catherine? I thought it meant arrival. Huh?
That is not Spanish.
It is. It's Costa Rican Spanish.
Yeah, Mexico.
But it might be some tribal language anyway. I thought it was Spanish. Might not be. But if you look here, you can actually start seeing it happen. Those are actually dug up eggs. So as these guys come, this beach is only 2 miles long, guys, and they estimate that in a rebidas they can have about 100,000 nesting events. One turtle will lay up to 2 or 3 times, right? So some do, some don't. So that's not 100,000 turtles. And I asked them when I was there, well, how do you know it's 100,000? Well, they have no idea, because how do you count the bloody things, right? You don't even know how many there are. But it's very, very hard. But these guys are laying. Then the next wave comes, and they lay in the same place. And as they dig the eggs down into the ground, right, so they can stay warm, they actually dig up the other ones. So the method is really smart, because then they let the people. Normally this is unusual, but normally it happens at night, and then in the morning, for the first 2 or 3 days, the people come and harvest all these eggs. Very easy to see where they are, trails and spots. You know what you're looking for. They harvest the eggs. It's like 50 or 60 eggs in a grouping, I think, if I remember correctly. And it's cool. But everybody has a job. So social structure, we'll find out with sustainability, is one of the 3 spheres. We've got social health, economic health, and environmental health. Sustainability is when those 3 come together. So socially, that's how this started. Okay? So that's the social sphere of this thing. Okay? Community, and including community action. Right? There's a lot of community action going on locally right now against not against renewable energy, but against the planning and implementation of renewable energy in the Mojave Desert right now. A lot of people, including myself, don't agree with how they're going about it. So solar and wind energy. So there's community action going on. But the key word is community, building community. It respects the stewardship ethics of all people. There's a high level of respect for all groups, not just the most advantaged groups, okay? Especially the people who work the land, right? We understand that they might know, the farmers, the miners, might know a little bit more about the land than the average person. 6, innovative participatory policy change. So that's for the political people. We want to change some policies. We want to change some laws, but we know we need to participate in them. We're asking for the local community people, normally who get left out, the lower rungs, the not in government people, the not economically advantaged people get left out. Seeks new kinds of economic systems. Okay, and we will talk about that a little bit. Seeks wide solutions and long term. So locally we have one of these plans, okay, a plan that does this, the solution, a long-term plan. The word plan should be really put in there after that. We want these long-term planning initiatives. So we have one locally called the West Mojave Plan. It was developed mostly by the Bureau of Land Management. That's Department of the Interior. They manage most, between them and Forest Service and military, they manage 80% of the land around us here. Okay? So they came up with the West Mojave Plan on how to implement conservation of water, species, and all sorts of things. But one of the criticisms against the West Mojave Plan is that it was based mostly on the tortoise, the desert tortoise, as the key species. And this kind of thinking says, no, desert tortoise is important, they're cute, they're threatened, they're under fire, but it's much more important, all the species, and especially people, especially what affects the community, the people themselves, okay? That's what tends to get left out completely some of the time, okay? Education is huge. We'll find out a little bit later. It's one of the 4 E's we're going to talk about in sustainability. Utilizes internet and social networks, which, as you know, is kind of cool because this is a new development that's really helped, because the sustainable development movement has to be very transparent. Because if we're trying to keep the economic corporations happy and functioning and our economic system live and jobs, and then we're also concerned about species and habitat, and we're also concerned about the local communities and schools and healthcare systems, we have to be very transparent. If you are biased and actually aren't clear about where you're biased, because we're all going to be biased in one way or another, we all have our certain things that are really important to us, and it's not clear and not transparent, you're going to lose people's trust. And this is all about building trust. Okay? And the internet and social networks are great at this, right? They catch you out in a big hurry if you are saying and doing things that aren't as you say they are. Is it a social revolution? Okay, so the book talks about whether it's equivalent to the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to leave that up to you. I would just say that I personally believe that it's a very important movement. It's been going for a long time now. I personally don't see that there's any other way that we can do development, human development. Because we've got 8 billion people and they're growing, and we don't have a choice. And the way I look at it mostly is what this is all about is we have natural, if you imagine, and I think most people are thinking this way, either in a panic mode or they kind of think deeply. We feel like our earth is really struggling, right? How many people would feel like everything's just hunky-dory, we're all in good shape, right? Especially locally here, where we just went through a huge economic downturn, and it really hasn't come back very much at all. There are no jobs. But the way to think of it, one way to think of it is the earth, our little living body of earth, the little strip of it, of sphere around the earth where things are living and interacting and functioning so that we can live and have worthwhile lives is on life support. Okay, so just let's imagine right now we're on life support, right? And there's 2 life support systems that you can, easy way to think about it is the natural life support system. So for food crops, you need soil. You need functioning soil. Soil is an ecosystem. It's functioning. It's not just dirt. You need water. You need air. You need water. Okay? So there's natural life support systems, right? Then there's man-made life support systems like healthcare, like government, like our political system, like school systems and school boards and all those kinds of, those are man-made. Like our economic system, that's a man-made life support system that supports life on Earth, right? And in Green Revolution, the big difference is it's not just about the animals and the birds and the habitat. It's taking man and putting them right in the middle and saying, yeah, you caused a lot of this damage. You've been overusing it, abusing it, not being very nice to it. But on the other hand, you have the intelligence, the technology, and in some cases, we still have the social structure to make a change and to fix it. Okay? All right, so characteristics of sustainability, social action groups. If you're going to work on a certain intention, we just started one up in South and East Apple Valley and Lucerne Valley. It's called the Mojave Community Conservation Collaborative, MC3. And we have similar intentions. We want to have local, long-term, transparent planning going on for renewable energy projects, especially the big ones. Okay? We have large, diverse groups. Okay? So in the sustainability movement and the social action that goes on with that is large, a wide range of issues. Working in our group up there, we've got one guy that's really interested in OHV and making sure that OHV use still is part of the picture. And of course it should be. There's other people that are from the Sierra Club, and guess what? They hate OHV, but they don't hate it enough not to be part of the group. They've got to get that under control. just as the OHV person has to realize that they do need to stay on the designated trail and they need to be good citizens. Okay? Decentralized leadership, we talked about that. Oppositional alternative modes of action. So, it's not the normal kinds of ways of taking action in terms of how we deal with this. We don't go necessarily through all the normal channels. Not that we don't go to planning meetings and all that. But we've had a few rallies in Apple Valley recently. We just brought a bunch of people together, and politicians, whoever wanted to show up, it was just kind of a free fall that at times was kind of crazy, but at times was really good. One point I want to mention, and we'll be kind of talking with Dino's group. Dino's just showing up right now. The difference between sustainability and environmentalism. Okay, in Dino's book and that way of looking, they're just defining. Hey, bud. Hey. This is Dino Bozanelis. He's going to be teaching the policy side of this whole thing. And so sustainability is not environmentalism. And that doesn't mean it couldn't be for you that they're the same thing. When Dino and I lunched today, we were kind of talking about how the environmentalists, so in my world, in the sustainability world, most of the sustainability world, environmentalism can have a negative connotation. Okay? Not that it's warranted or anything else, but environmentalism is used for people that take action strictly for the environment. And in general, they don't include man in that picture. They tend to get man out of the picture. They'd like to close it in and just protect the birds and the bees, right? Sustainability opens that up, and just as we already said, puts man back in the middle. Not that actually, if you look at some of the definitions of environmental science, that's what environmental science actually properly defined says. It says, let's deal with the whole environment with man in the middle. It's just that in certain circumstances, you need to be aware that these things mean different things to different people. Okay? So when you call me environmentalist, which I get called that all the time, I kind of go like, well, I want to say, well, no, I'm not really environmentalist the way I define it, but I understand where you come from, and because you're also in the conversation, that's fine. I would say that some parts of the Sierra Club are more environmentalist than I am. So it's a terminology thing, and it's just the same old story. We've got to be clear on the way we use these words. These are big words that mean a lot of things to different people. Okay, and basically the biggest conflict here was right there. Is environmentalism in the past tended to polarize ecological concerns, the birds and the bees and the ecology, against business interests. So here at Victor Valley College, when we first started down this path, our first partners were the big mines up in Lucerne Valley. And I personally, Dino, we've actually been attacked at times for being environmentalists because they perceived that we were anti-business. But you see, in sustainability, I don't get to do that because I might say I don't like your business model and I think you could change some things, but I don't get to say, I don't care about money and the economic sphere, because we have to balance, again, economic sphere, health, with social sphere and its health, and the environmental sphere. And then sustainability is where we find that balance. Okay? So, real quick, I showed them, Dino will like this. I showed them, there's not Neville surfing at Ostinal. Dino's been surfing with me, so he knows that's definitely not me.
You just say it's you.
But I showed them collecting eggs at Ostinal, and we're just kind of like threw these images up, and now we're starting to talk about them. And then we showed them the Ribidas happening. And so economically now, let's quickly bring that piece in. So I'll get what I heard there, and Dino can correct or correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that, I remember that the average income for a family in Costa Rica was about 10 grand, 10,000, and these people they locally are at about 5 to 20,000, about half again as much. So they're at about 15 to 20,000 for their family income. So it's made a big difference economically. So they not only have had to make trade-offs economically, they, through this practice, have done better. Okay? So then the last part we'll talk about in a second is the environmental side. What's happened environmentally with this? Does this help this environmental thing or not? And we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay? So the history, and I'm going to go through this really quickly because you guys can read this, and I'm going already a lot longer, is transcendentalists. Remember, early times, you know, especially from the Judeo-Christian side of the house, and I am one of those, so I can bag on them, is, you know, we kind of read Genesis 1:26 a little bit too literally, in my opinion. It says, I make man in my image, and I allow him to have dominion over the living things. If you read that a little more carefully, and parts of it really says, I want you to take care of this stuff. I'm not here, I want you to take care of it. But we had dominion, so we had this attitude of firstly being scared of these wild animals in the environment, and the second thing that it belonged to man. So we could use it up, and resources were so plentiful, we never saw the consequences of that, right? Then people like the transcendentalists, John Muir, Aldo Leopold, we're going to watch his movie, Green Fire, after the break tonight. They started to think about this a little differently, but look at the time frame here. I would say the only real change started happening here. They started to think about conservation, which conservation simply means better management of all these resources. Conservation is a management scheme, okay? And then Rachel Carson, that's when our first outcries came in the early 60s, late 60s and 70s, saying, hey, we're overusing this stuff and we don't care about the waste. So we've got rivers catching alight, and we've got the Great Lakes in terrible pollution, and you can't see one street from another in Riverside. I'll pick Riverside because Dino used to live there, because the smog is so thick. And it's true. Once we put in place policies and laws like the Clean Water Act, like the Air Quality Control Act, like the Environmental Protection Agency that manages all these laws, the Endangered Species Act, we were just abusing stuff, wasting and abusing stuff. And we've come a long way, okay? United Nations started talking about these things. They have the United Nations Environmental Program. They developed that. They started in the United States. Jimmy Carter came up with the Superfund, CERCLA, that is about brownfields and cleaning up drastically bad environmental pollution issues. And in the 80s is the first time that sustainability really starts to catch hold in this country. Lester Brown is also the guy that was responsible for Earth Day. We start taking an interest in this new concept of sustainable development. Okay? And then the UN created the World Commission on the Environment, and then that ultimately led to the Brundtland Report in 1987, which was where the main definition of sustainability came out of. Okay, so this is all United Nations stuff, and that is right here. I'm going to ask you in this class really to think about what sustainability means to you, and also in the context of your life, but this is what's accepted as the main one. So it's development, human development, that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Very, very simple. We're going to live within our means here. We're going to conserve. We're going to manage better. We're going to be better stewards of what we have economically, socially, and environmentally, naturally, and so we can provide for our kids, right? That's just as simple as it is. as you can say it. Okay.
Ned,
Yeah.
I was gonna ask a
Yeah.
question. And thank you for letting me come in late, by the way.
No, no problem.
I'm Dr. Dino Bozanellos. I'm Neville's partner in crime. And so you guys can call me just Dino. And a question that I wanted to follow up with, that this definition here that the former Prime Minister of Norway, Brundtland, gives, says that we have to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future. And Neville says that requires us to live within our means. What does that mean to you? Personally, living within our means.
Reducing our carbon footprint.
What's that, Mike?
Reducing our carbon footprint.
What is a carbon footprint?
Basically, like things that you do and then how it impacts the world, and trying to lower that and be less of like a fossil of what you've done throughout your life. That's impacting your.
Okay. What does that mean to you personally?
Meeting your needs instead of your wants.
Okay. Do you mind expanding on that?
Instead of
What is something
buying a
that we
really
want?
expensive car
Okay.
that's 8 miles to the gallon as opposed to a hybrid that's 50 miles to the gallon.
Okay. All right. What else? What else does it mean? Rashard? Eating a few shrimp instead of eating a whole bunch of shrimp. I think I'm guilty of that. What else? What does it mean to you, living within our means? Go ahead.
It's freedom from dependence.
Dependence on what?
Dependence on an outside source of providing the means for sustainable living for yourself, i.e. like to have your own garden. So you don't have to drive to the store and hope, hey, I hope that's something I can afford to eat here. Versus you can put those minuscule amount of money to actually produce your own food and not have to worry about like sudden crop failure or an outside source that will just skyrocket a price or make what you want or what you
You're not
need.
dependent on other people's to feed your family or put
Exactly.
gas in your car or whatever. Sherry, did you have your hand raised?
It's kind of similar to what he said, just being able to provide for your own self, and not having to rely on society or outside sources to have what you need to live day to day.
Okay.
And,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
and not living, like when you say living beyond your means, not living like on credit and
Oh,
things
yeah,
like
sure.
that, living, you make so much, that's how much you spend. And
Could we apply that to the earth?
Absolutely.
The earth and it only has so much, so that's how much we should spend. Do we live that way though as a society?
No, we don't.
No. We see this definition, right, and it just seems so abstract, does it not?
Yeah.
Development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations, right? And Neville says we need to live within our means. Sustainable development isn't something that he does, or I do, or government does. Sustainable development is something that you do.
Yeah.
Okay, you do. We. Does that make sense? We do. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Another thing that I've been trying to do is there's a fruit that's in the grocery store that's just super high, it's sky high. I refuse to buy it because of the fact that I think I'm promoting bad things. If
Promoting
you're
bad
saying it's
practices.
okay to pay $3 a pound for a peach, grow your own. Don't pay that kind of money for it. Just
Just
use to
talking
eat
about
it.
the concept of consciousness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Being conscious. What Neville and I hope to do, and we'll definitely continue, and I apologize. I didn't
No,
mean-
no, this is
My apologies for
perfect.
hijacking.
This is perfect, because I was getting on this roll of, I'm running late, and I want to get, but this is what we need to talk about.
Yeah.
That's what the class is meant to be, by the way. It's not a bunch of lectures, but it's meant to be discussions.
We
So
want to have
thank
a
you.
consciousness of ourselves, and that leads us to be more careful of what we do. Doesn't mean that we have to stop making money or that we have to stop enjoying things. I don't think
Right.
that's what sustainable development is about. Sustainable development is, do we have to enjoy? Can we enjoy without destroying? It's a great question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question to have, and I don't know if I have the answer, and I don't really know if it's possible, to be honest with you. But maybe it's something we try. And I'm not going to say we're perfect or we have great answers. I don't have one. You know what I mean? I really don't. Just being honest with you. But we're going to try, and that's I think the effort is far more than any other generation has done before.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. Ma'am?
Just going on what she was saying with, the fruits and vegetables and paying, so much for them is, we need to learn to shop locally, whether it's, through a local farm or,
Why does shopping locally help sustain?
Your
Why is it
community.
sustainable?
your
Because the dollar stays
Or-
here.
The
in
dollar
Mighty
stays here?
Desert,
Yeah.
And it stays here 3 times more than if you were to go to one of those big stores.
So even if it costs a little bit more than maybe what you buy at Food for Less, the fact that the money stays here is more sustainable. It circulates. Minus the transportation costs, minus the refrigeration, minus everything that it took for that fruit to come out from Costa
Chile.
Rica or Chile.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. Pick
And
your
not
Latin
only that,
American.
it's much
Pick
healthier
your Latin
anyway.
American country, right? Yeah. It doesn't matter.
It's
yeah.
much healthier for the way it's grown and transported and all that kind of stuff and all the,
Right,
the
right.
chemicals they're putting on things and stuff.
And then one more, and then I'll never off.
Yeah, no, sure.
What if we have community awareness and you taught the community
Mhm.
how to grow your fruit? And then once
Absolutely.
you've got the fruit growing, to share the abundance with the community so that way you don't have to spend all that money. You have, like they say, if you teach him how to fish, you know, he'll live
Yeah,
longer, stuff
exactly.
like that. So if you teach the community, look, we have a club that we would like you to join, and if we can teach you how to, you might have a apricot this big, but we can teach you how to make it this big. And so if you could do that in your community, I think it would pay off.
Education.
Yeah, exactly.
Education.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of your
Yeah.
E's.
Right. So one of the consciousness I just want to point out to you is Rochelle in front here is hard of hearing. So again, being conscious of where we are in the community, try to talk as loud as possible. So 2 things come out of that conversation. One is community, and you'll hear Dino and I talk all the time about what's lacking is the integrity of that community, how it functions, because that's what's most breaking up. You know, we know from the family on up, that's what's breaking up all over the world. I come from South Africa, from the Zulu people, who are the proudest, greatest, most awesome nation in the world. I'm sorry, I'm just half Zulu myself, okay? But through apartheid and through even independence, where the other tribe, the Xhosas, took over, they lost their community integrity, they lost their tribal system, they lost their way completely, and they are unsustainable. So I heard community, I also heard education. And so we're going to move on right now. This is a really good segue into what we call the 3 E's of sustainability. So they're right there. I'll go to this. This should be real soon here. Sorry, I'm going to skip all this. We're going to go right here. Okay, so there we go. That's the whole of it, except for one more piece we're going to talk about in a moment. So economic values, economic health. You know, Lucerne Valley, as an example, is one of our most sustainable communities. Much as people laugh at Lucerne Valley, they have a very good source of income, and it's the local mines. But if AB 32 runs its full course, the Global Warming Act, the mines up there that produce a lot of CO2, one of them is a cement mine that produces millions of tons of CO2 a year because it's part of the process of making cement. Carbonate, calcium carbonate, limestone, when they make cement, automatically releases carbon dioxide. That's the process. If they can't, through various systems and new models of economic models, if they can't get past that and they get shut down, then that will be economically unsustainable for Lucerne Valley, because everything depends on them. The schools, the senior center, the stores, they all depend on those 3 huge mines on the hill there, and people driving through, but that's about it. So economic is 1 E. Social values, that's not E, but it's interesting because, and again, this is what my heart is. I came from South Africa. I grew up in apartheid, and obviously I'm a white guy, right? But as I told you, I grew up on a farm way remote in the hills. I mean, we were out there, and in many ways, still am a little bit, right, out there. But all the kids we grew up with my dad and our family of 4 boys, and then 4 families that worked on our farm. And this is a poor farm. The people who lived down in the valleys were extremely wealthy, some of the most wealthy people anywhere in the world, probably in Africa especially. But we lived up there, and my parents came from a different system. They didn't believe in apartheid, didn't even understand it, and they didn't allow us to have any kind of unfairness, discrimination. Hi guys. I heard you guys were coming. That's awesome. So they didn't allow us to do any of this. And the word that best describes healthy social systems, and that's why it's so cool that Dino's here as a social scientist, because this is the hardest part of sustainability, is getting your social values, your social system to work properly, because nothing happens unless that's healthy, right? Everything breaks down. You start having wars and strife and all sorts of crazy things happen. And that comes down to the word equity, fairness, equity. If I respect you, if I choose to understand you, and I teach you equitably, fairly, doesn't mean we're all going to have the same things, right? In South Africa, we struggled with this at the end of apartheid because we joke about it in South Africa is everyone expected to drive a Mercedes. And that's how we say it. It's a Mercedes. And everybody's going to drive a fancy car. Well, no, I'm never going to drive a Mercedes, never mind a whole bunch of other people with less advantages than I do. Okay? So equity is the E for social, for the social sphere. And if we had to, in all over the world, if we had to draw this, this one in the United States is like out this room over here.
Yep.
We're driven by economic drivers, right? The fourth quarter earnings on the stock market are king. A corporation will not go against that or jeopardize those in any way. Environmental, pretty dang good. We have a lot of good science out there. We have a lot of awareness. We're not so bad. But the social one is like the size of a pea. I'm sorry. That thing is in total disarray, in my opinion. And that's why when Dino and I first started to work together and I saw his work in Model United Nations, my son was part of one of his teams. I was like, man, we need help. And so we basically, out of necessity, at first started working together, and over time just became the greatest of friends, and it's just been the most amazing thing. And I'm starting to learn about that sphere, but that's what's so cool. That's what's so cool about having your political science people here, is that's the side that you bring that's so, so important. Then there's environmental values and environmental health. We can easily define these. We know when something goes wrong. If a species goes extinct, or like in Costa Rica, what are the indicators, would you think, of good environmental health just with that ecosystem that revolves around those turtles? What would be some of the things you'd expect to see if this sustainable practice of harvesting the first 2 days of the eggs was working? What would you expect to be some of the indicators? What would I want to see if I was looking at that and say, is it working?
Less poaching.
Less poaching. Awesome. And yeah, in that part, not on some of the other beaches where there are almost no turtles laying their eggs, but in that part, they pretty much got the poaching thing under control. I think they still had one dude in town that they were a bit worried about, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So what else would be an indicator that the environmental thing is, natural sphere is working well?
Population of the turtles would
Exactly. So triple in the last
Yeah, I think it was
15,
triple.
20 years,
Yeah.
turtles coming to that beach have tripled. The olive ridley turtle all over the world is endangered in other parts of the world, but in all that area is in great shape. So yeah, there are tons of things. The whole structure and all the animals that are related to that are also in good shape. So the whole ecosystem.
Neville, I don't know if he had a chance to tell you, one of the social values on why they used to eat the turtle eggs. Reason why turtle eggs are so popular is because guys would drink them at bars, thinking that it would allow them to last longer in bed. So that's why turtle eggs, that's why people were grabbing them by the thousands, and they were selling them all throughout Central America. The turtle eggs would allow you to,
So they're like an aphrodisiac.
correct, have an erection longer. That's what
And
it was designed to do.
unfortunately-
That's what they thought. There's no science behind that. That was a social value. Did you not?
Okay.
So our social value in Costa Rica changed, And now what happens is that the little blue pill Viagra, they argue, has maybe saved the turtle. Because now in order to have a sustainable erection, you now just need a little blue pill. And I know it sounds funny, right?
Yeah.
But this is literally the social value
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
The economic value changed.
Yeah.
They were more conscious of the environment.
Yeah.
And what's happened now to the turtle population?
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you see how that all comes together?
Yeah.
And that confluence of events is what it's allowed it. Scientists are going now, they're doing really good research, and now they can make money off the guided tours, right? And bringing people like us over that pay to see this. And now they no longer drink turtle eggs in bars so they can go home, right? And so all those things have changed, and now we have a better system in place. That's what they mean by, that's what Neville means by social values.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
No, good.
Stuff like that.
That helps.
Interesting, right?
It does take a change in your actual core values.
Yeah, how you see things.
Yeah, good. So a couple of things. I've just moved on to the second E, because the first one, the environmental one, you'll see tons of that. We've talked about some of the principles behind it. But employment is really key, right? So when we look at renewable energy, which is really on top of my mind right now, and we'll be possibly using for the position paper if people want to do the position paper, employment is huge, right? So we're going to look at renewable energy and see what's the employment. What's the employment? What you think is the number of people employed with this fairly large size, semi-utility scale solar farm right on VBC's campus? How many jobs does that create for the community?
Very little.
How many?
3.
3? Maybe, I don't know. You probably know more. You're just guessing, or you know? Oh, it is 3. Where the half I know is the guy that cleans it.
And the guy that owns it.
Oh, okay, yeah. But actually, yeah, let me qualify this. Employment, again, we're talking local, because economic is really important that it supports the local community. Local employment is about a half. There's one company they employ to come and clean those very low paying, come and clean, wash off those PV panels. Okay, so it's very low. But there are more people, but those are sitting up in San Francisco. Solera is up in San Francisco, and they are processing the information up there. Okay, so it's not good. But just an example, looking at employment. In the Costa Rican example, just about everyone in town is involved somewhere in the turtle business. Guides and policemen and anti-poaching or whatever it is. A couple of things I want to talk to you about is how do we change the economy? Well, we start looking at subsidizing and incentivizing sustainable practices. So in forestry and agriculture, instead of sustaining and incentivizing dairy that is intensive and industrialized, we incentivize sustainable forms of dairy, producing milk and dairy products. We do sustainable forestry. We incentivize that. We give subsidies, government subsidies for that. One more thing I want to talk about is natural capital. In a sustainable economic model, we start giving value to natural capital. So what would you think natural capital is? We know what regular capital is, right? If you're going to start a business, what capital do you use to start your business? Money. What else?
Supplies.
Huh?
Supplies.
Supplies. Infrastructure like buildings, that's capital. What's the other main form of capital we use?
Labor.
Labor, people. Whether it's entrepreneurial, managerial, or whether it's labor. You know, basic people to work there. Now we're throwing in another one, natural capital. And so we're going to say if I'm in agriculture, I'm going to give my soil a value. And I'm not just going to let it run off into the ocean. I'm going to use soil conservation. I'm going to use techniques like less plowing, less tilling, low till, to make sure my soil stays on my farm and its structure and its function, its ecology increases. Okay? I'm going to grow a legume every once in a while to improve the soil quality, things like that. So natural capital starts becoming part of the way we build our economic system. Okay, it comes into the thinking, into our consciousness. Okay, the third equity is equality, sense of community, right? The reason that Lucerne Valley and Apple Valley are up in arms is because we do have a sense of community. Apple Valley sells its stuff on rural living lifestyle. You can keep your animals, you can drive your horses, you can ride your OHV vehicle, whatever it is, you can do it in Apple Valley there, and we mostly know each other. Okay? So there's a sense of community and pride, and therefore we're all going to work for the betterment of the community. There's cooperation, there's respect. We understand we're interdependent. One comment kind of struck me a little bit off when we were talking about, and it was well intentioned, but we talked about growing it all ourselves, being independent. Well, actually, we're independent from, we want to be as much independent and not dependent on outside things, but actually we want to be as much as possible dependent on our local community, right? We all want to work together and use our resources effectively, okay? And we respect the contribution of all people, right? Okay, the fourth E, and this is where I'm going to end here. This will be online, so you guys can follow this. This is basically just the introduction and chapter 1 of the book that we're using in our book, and basically it's education. So we've kind of touched on this, but this is just as you go through, it's kind of cool because I am an educator. Because obviously I'd be a little biased on this one. I think it's important, but as you go through, it just becomes so important. I was telling you about our MC3 group we started, right? The social action group to bring awareness to the poor planning in the renewable energy here in the desert. And it's just so interesting because we have had to talk a lot. I've had to write a concept paper about what's going on, basically a position paper myself, although it's probably not written very well, but basically get everyone educated. Because next moment, somebody's off on their rabbit trail, you know. We need OHV vehicles, and these politicians, they're just all a bunch of jerks. And you know, there's that Bundy thing going on up there in Bureau of Land Management up in Nevada, you know, that cattle rancher, and BLM is evil. Well, no. Hold up. We cannot antagonize, not that we shouldn't tell the truth, but we cannot antagonize one of the key partners in this, which is the Bureau of Land Management. And locally, our Bureau of Land Management are working really hard to find a balance. So you've got to be educated. You've got to understand the Endangered Species Act a little bit. You've got to understand AB 32 a little bit. And you've got to understand especially how government works. And that's why you guys on the political science side have such an advantage, because we've got to understand how this works so that me as a public citizen that wants a voice has a sensible voice, a voice that can be heard and makes a difference, rather than making it worse. And it's just amazing without education how quickly that can happen. All right, so let's take, we're running a little bit late, but not too bad. Let's take a break till 5:30, and then Dino will be lecturing to you guys. So we'll still be breaking at about 6:30 for dinner. Good one. Oh, no, just fill out the application.